Austin Hill intentionally wrecks Eric Almirola during the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway and could be facing some really major penalties. And Denny Hamlin is signing a multi-year contract extension with Joe Gibbs Racing. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel and welcome back to the video. We got some NASCAR and Motorsports story discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Toyota. As I believe it was reported by Jeff Gluck after the Cup Series qualifying and officially concluded from the Brickyard 400 that Toyota, for the first time in their NASCAR Cup Series history, scored the top 5 starting spots for the Brickyard 400. Toyota was really dominant during qualifying. Of course, Chase Briscoe won the pole. Bubba Wallace started on the front row. Of course, went on to win the Brickyard 400. Erik Jones started in third. I believe that Denny Hamlin was originally going to be inside the top 5 before spinning out. And a couple other drivers from Joe Gibbs Racing, including Tyler Reddick, who's from 2311, also qualified inside the top 5. Was really impressed to see what Toyota did. Congratulations to them on making history for the first time for that team. It's really impressive. Good to see him get that done and do that for the first time in Toyota's history. Congratulations to them on getting that done. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. and Richard Petty. Now, many of you already probably seen the music video at this point, but Richard Petty and Dale Jr. were featured in Luke Combs' new music video that came out on Friday early morning called Back in the Saddle. Of course, they had Dale Jr. driving a number 8 late model. Didn't really have any sponsorship on the late model, but I think it's really cool to see NASCAR get represented in one of the biggest country music singers in Luke Combs, who's released a lot of major hits on the country charts and also in the music charts as well. That was a really cool deal to see. Pretty cool to see Dale Jr. and Richard Petty get the chance and opportunity to be in Luke Combs' new music video. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, Junior Motorsports yesterday made history as they were able to win their 100th career win as an organization in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, becoming only the 4th team in Xfinity Series history to have 100 wins. The driver to do that was Conor Zilch, who has gone 3 in a row in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, we're going to talk about Conor in the second half of this episode because some big stuff around him. But Conor Zilch has scored 5 wins so far 2025. And it makes the most sense for someone who's been so dominant this year in Xfinity competition to be the one to give Junior Motorsports their 100th win in competition. Congratulations to Junior Motorsports on making history, reaching 100 wins. They were really fast. It looked like Justin Algar was going to be the driver before Kyle Larson got in there. We'll talk about that here in just a short little bit. But for Junior Motorsports, it's very impressive to have 100 wins in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition and have 12 of those wins so far in 2025, which is absolutely unbelievable in around 21 or 22 races that have been ran this year. Great to see them reach 100 wins in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition. Congrats to them on getting it done. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim. As a Corey Heim scoring a really strong finish in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at IRP, he has won the 2025 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series regular season championship. And keep this in mind, we still have 2 races left in the regular season. That is how dominant Corey Heim has been. He has won a lot of stages, led more than 1,000 laps in NASCAR Craftsman Truck competition, and has just won a lot of races this year with 5 wins up to this point. And you think about how good he's been this year. He probably should have more than 5 victories. He probably should have double that at this point, how great he has been. But for seeing him win the regular season championship, it's not surprising or shocking. Now watch to see him probably lose a championship because we're going to go to Phoenix and probably won't win the championship at that point because where the last race is. But nonetheless, congratulations to him on winning the Craftsman Truck Series regular season championship. He earned it, he well earned it, and he gets it done. Good to see him get that done. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Belgian Grand Prix. Before the IndyCar race took place at Laguna Secika and the Brickyard 400 took place in Indianapolis Motor Speedway, you had the Belgian Grand Prix early in the morning. Now, the race did not get started immediately as rain was a major factor throughout the weekend, and they had to delay the start of the race by about an hour or so. But once they got it going, this race would be dominated by Oscar Piastri. Now, Lando Norris, they tried to play a little bit of different strategy with Lando Norris, but Lando Norris never really could get back up there on the harder tires and was running down Oscar Piastri, who was managing, but he made multiple mistakes. This will let Oscar Piastri pull out to a near 5 or 6 second lead. At one point, nearly had a 10-second lead, and Lando was gaining a lot of ground, but Lando would run out of time to get there, and Oscar would come off the final corner by 3 seconds to pick up, I believe, his 5th or 6th win or something like that of 2025, and extends his points lead in Formula 1. Oscar Piastri has been so dominant this year in Formula 1, it is very likely that unless Lando Norris can go on a charge late, it's very likely that Oscar is going to win the championship. It has been so impressive to see Oscar be as good as he is. and has kept it generally very humble as well throughout 2025. So to see him win his first ever Belgian Grand Prix, it's a well-earned and well-deserved win, and gets it done in the Belgian Grand Prix. I think he's going to win a lot more races this year and probably win a championship the way things are going for him in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Laguna Secika race that IndyCar just put on not too long ago. As before, during the Brickyard 400 that was going on, we had the race at Laguna Secika for IndyCar, and this race will be dominated by one driver all day, and that of course is Alex Palou. Alex Palou came to this race being 99 points ahead of Pato O'Ward, and both were starting on the front row. There will be some incidents throughout the day. Kiffin Simpson had some sort of issue, ran into the back of, I believe, Felix Rosenqvist. Kiffin's day would be over. Then he had Jacob Abel, who had a braking issue on the right rear of the car, if I'm not mistaken, and spun unfortunately into basically the gravel trap. And then of course we have Marcus Ericsson spin out. I don't know why it took so long to throw the caution. You also have Rainis VK, who got dumped by Kyle Kirkwood at one point, and then Santina Frigid got stuck in the gravel with around 10 laps to go. But it wouldn't matter at the end, as no one could really challenge Alex Palou all day long. He would come off the corner and win his 8th IndyCar race of 2025 and extend his lead 120 to 121 points. It is very realistic that if he dominates at Portland, he could lock the championship up when we get to Portland in a couple of weeks. And he's the odds-on favorite to win, considering how good he's been at Portland in the past. But Palou put on a dominating clinic. He absolutely earned the win, put together an unbelievable run. Good to see him get it done. And congratulations to him on winning the IndyCar race once again. I think it's going to be very tough to beat Alex Palou with how good and how dominant he's been so far in IndyCar in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tai Gibbs. Now, obviously, one of the big storylines coming in today was the in-season challenge. You had a double between two of the Tais, Tai Gibbs and Ty Dillon. Whichever driver was the first driver to cross the finish line first, that driver, of course, will receive $1 million. Now, Ty Dillon put up a little bit of fight early in the event, but unfortunately, Ty Dillon got caught up in a stack-up restart, I believe at the beginning of stage number 2, where Ricky Stenhouse Jr. got on the outside wall, and Ty Dillon, Kyle Busch, and a couple other guys got a lot of damage in that wreck. This would pretty much hand Ty Gibbs the opportunity. Unless he crashed out of the event, there was no way Ty Gibbs is going to get beat, and Ty Gibbs would finish around 21st position. Not a great finish, but Ty Gibbs would come off the corner and win the in-season challenge and win $1 million. I think it's well earned for Ty Gibbs. He's put together a lot of really good runs today. It was not his best run, but he put together a lot of really strong runs, and I think he's earned the $1 million because, I think I had him going to the round of 8 originally. I thought he'd be going pretty far in this, but to see Ty Gibbs win, it's a big deal for Ty. It's going to help him as well as $1 million. Of course, a lot of that is going to go to his grandfather, Joe, so he will get a larger portion of that money, but not all of it. But for Ty, it's pretty cool to see him get the chance and opportunity to win the in-season challenge. It's a shame that Ty Dillon didn't get the chance to win the in-season challenge, but good to see it for him that Ty Gibbs is finally a driver who has finally won the in-season challenge. Good to see him win the $1 million. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Cory Day. Now, Cory Day, of course, competed in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Indianapolis Raceway Park, and Cory Day put together a very impressive performance in the Truck Series race, as he finished second place and finished runner-up to Lane Race, who put together a dominant clinic. Outside of that really dominant run by Lane Race, I think the most impressive driver was Cory Day. In the last couple races, he has been starting to figure it out. He, of course, finished 5th at Nashville Super Speedway, had a really solid run going at Nashville in the Xfinity race later that week. I believe he almost finished inside the top 10 there, and had a really good run going at Sonoma before unfortunately getting turned by Austin Hill, and if Blease still finishing inside the top 20, all things considered. The last couple races for Cory have been looking really, really good. Early in the season, there was a lot of people saying that Cory Day was a bust because he wasn't really living up to the expectations and wasn't performing very, very well. But I think he is really starting to figure it out very, very quickly. And to be honest, it's super, super impressive how quickly he's getting up to speed. It would not surprise me or shock me, considering I think he's only got 1 or 2 more scheduled Truck Series starts. It would not surprise if he goes out and wins that Truck Series start that he has scheduled, because what he is doing, he's been doing a much better job. He's showing a lot more speed, and he's doing a much better job behind the wheel, and that's what we've been wanting to see from him at this point, because he really hasn't had the consistency on a week-by-week basis. For him to go out there, it's a well-earned second place finish. Did a really, really good job. Good to see Cory Day do very well, showing some major, major improvement in the Hendrick development pipeline. Good to see him get it done and get a strong finish. Didn't win the race, but did a really good job at IRP. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Medusa Ransomware. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday afternoon that Medusa Ransomware, it has been confirmed that NASCAR has confirmed the Medusa Ransomware breach that we didn't really talk about much not too long ago. But Medusa Ransomware was trying to breach and maybe help with the lawsuit, I'm not entirely sure. But they were demanding $4 million in ransom to basically release a lot of information that the NASCAR does not want to be made public. And some of the stuff, of course, could be, I think, help in the lawsuit going forward. Obviously, we don't know if they've been given the $4 million. I'd have to think NASCAR will probably give them the $4 million so they don't release all the information, because I've said this before, NASCAR does not want a lot of their information made public, so if they can find any way to not release that information, they're going to do what they can to not release that information. So the sooner they get rid of all the evidence on that front, the better it's going to be. But it's kind of wild now that we've got confirmation on this Medusa Ransomware, but it doesn't shock me and surprise me because I don't think NASCAR has ever had a breach like this before from a hacker company like this. So to see something like this in the NASCAR world is wild. I think we've seen it in other sports leagues, but it's very rare to see in a motorsports league where you got a company like Medusa Ransomware coming in and trying to cause a lot of chaos and a lot of havoc where NASCAR doesn't want to probably get involved in something like this. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, it was confirmed on Friday that Tony Stewart has officially clinched a spot into the NHRA playoffs, which is known as the countdown for the championship. Tony Stewart comes into the upcoming races as a leader in the championship of the NHRA, and of course, Tony Stewart has picked up, I believe, a couple wins so far in 2025, including a win at Route 66. Tony Stewart is arguably one of the best race car drivers in the world. We obviously know he's won a lot of NASCAR races, 3 NASCAR Cup Series championships, won the Brickyard 400 twice in his career, and has won a lot of big things. He's won an IndyCar championship, had a good chance to win the Indy 500 multiple different times, won a lot of World of Outlaws races, won a lot of dirt races in his career, and now Tony Stewart is doing some impressive things by going into NHRA, a discipline that very few NASCAR drivers have had success with in the past, and is going out there and making the playoffs and has a really good chance to win his first ever NHRA championship. If he goes on to win his NHRA championship, you could probably argue he's the best driver in the world because what he did is so phenomenal. It's incredible to see that he gets a chance and opportunity to keep doing stuff like that. Well done to Tony Stewart, and congratulations to him on making it to the NHRA countdown for the championship. I think he's got a solid chance and a really strong opportunity to put it down and pick it up and get it done. Good to see him be able to go out there and make it to the NHRA playoffs and go for the countdown for the championship. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the ARCA race from Indianapolis Raceway Park. Before the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race got underway, you had the ARCA race that preceded it. And there were 2 drivers that dominated this event, and that was Brendan Butterbean Queen and Brent Cruz. Brendan would dominate the first half of this race, and his car was really good early in the event before the sun started going down. However, after they made some adjustments on the car, Brent Cruz would be the driver who would take the race lead with around 70 or 80 laps to go in the event and made the move to the inside and was able to hold on and pull out a pretty big lead at that point. And then on some of the ensuing restarts, after some of the cautions that took place, Brent Cruz continued to pull out, and Brendan Butterbean Queen was struggling a little bit and started losing a ton of ground and a lot of positions. Now, Brendan, of course, was able to recover to finish third, but did not beat Wallace, who is generally his championship rival this year in ARCA at this point. But Brent Cruz would pull out a pretty big and massive lead and would come off the corner late after some late race restarts and score his second ARCA win of 2025, and I believe pick up like a second or third career ARCA win as well. Brent Cruz, extremely talented race car driver, absolutely earned this win, put together a very impressive performance. He's been doing a really good job in the lower series currently at the moment. I know his truck series race did not go so well, but the Tricon trucks just didn't seem to have the pace and speed for the event. But I think what he has been doing in the lower series has been really good. I think of him being like Toyota's version of Conor Zilch, someone who's super talented, has a really good chance at opportunity to be very successful in the sport long term. And to see him go out there and win the ARCA Series race, he absolutely did a fantastic job. Congratulations to him on winning the ARCA race at IRP and getting a well-earned and well-deserved victory. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Fox coverage from the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Indianapolis Raceway Park. Now, I think a lot of people you saw on social media were really complaining about the race and saying that the race itself was not really good. I have to disagree with that. And I think a big reason why I think most people were really frustrated is because the Truck Series race at IRP was just not done very well by the Fox team, which isn't shocking and surprising. I put out a tweet after the Truck Series race concluded, and I basically said that I think that Fox needs to lose their coverage of the Truck Series because, in my opinion, how the series is being broadcasted by Fox, and this is not just a Truck Series issue, this has been a Fox issue for a couple years, but I think the Truck Series coverage, at least especially in recent years, has been absolutely atrocious and has been absolutely unacceptable in recent years. And that is what's so disappointing, right? Because, again, I think the Truck Series race, despite the fact that Lang Race put up an absolute dominant clinic and did an unbelievable and really, really good job, it just feels like Fox doesn't care. And they don't care about some of the things going on there. And it's just really disappointing because, again, I thought the race itself was fun. You had a lot of side-by-side, but there's no energy, and it doesn't help the fact either they're not going to the racetrack. I don't understand why the hell they cannot be at the racetrack for these races. That's something that should absolutely be a requirement. If you're going to be covering a series, remote broadcast should not be happening. And at least for TNT, even though their coverage hasn't been fantastic, at least they're showing up and being at the racetrack for these events. So I just think that Fox needs to get it together. Their coverage has been terrible. It's been abysmal, and it's not acceptable for coverage like that to be what it is. It was terrible, it was not good, and it was really, really bad for the Truck Series race at IRP, and I'm not shocked and surprised to see that the coverage was bad, considering we've seen it many times before where Fox doesn't do a good job on coverage, and the racing coverage is not very good at all. Wasn't shocked by the bad coverage, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Reaume and Roger Kroo. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Indianapolis Raceway Park, Fox really never did a good job covering this incident, but the only on-track incident that happened throughout the race was there was an incident between Josh Reaume, and we weren't sure what happened to Josh. Well, apparently there was some contact between Josh Reaume and Roger Kroo. Apparently Roger, we didn't get a good replay on this, but Roger was trying to make a pass on Josh Reaume, who was many, many laps down, as he was basically, I believe, 20 laps down at this point of the event. He apparently came down the racetrack from what some were saying, and Roger got into him. But for some reason, when you look at the tweet, Josh Reaume is trying to go out there and blame Roger Kroo for getting quote-unquote dumb. If you're a truck that is way off the pace, if you're a truck that's over 20 laps down or many, many laps down, you've already been in the garage in the first place because you have to have a driver change, you probably should get out of the way. There's no reason that a truck that is that far off the pace, considering Roger Kroo had a really solid truck all night long, was running inside the top 5 and top 10 early, which I believe this got Roger Kroo quite a bit of damage on his truck. I just don't understand if you're a truck that is off the pace, if you're a truck that's really, really far behind, you should not be getting in the way. And for some reason, some of these back markers and some of these people that race in this series just don't seem to grasp that, and they don't seem to understand it. And that to me is really frustrating and kind of stupid in my opinion because, yeah, it was no doubt that Roger got in him, but I don't think Roger had any sort of intentions to get into Josh Reaume. Because, again, those trucks have been super, super slow. Frankie Muniz has been so frustrated this year of how slow those trucks have been. And when you have someone like Josh Reaume, and I like Josh and I like what his team is trying to do, but their trucks are generally some of the slowest, if not the slowest trucks out there on a week-by-week basis. So I absolutely do understand the frustration there because there's no reason that we should be seeing this kind of stuff happening where there's frustration, it seems like, on a week-by-week basis with how things are going on in the lower series right now. And I just don't understand why Josh Reaume cannot take any sort of responsibility because, to me, this is a no-brainer thing. Roger, in my opinion, really didn't do anything wrong in that situation. I don't think Josh Reaume should be blaming Roger. I think you should blame yourself for trucks not being up to speed and not being up to par, really, in any way, shape, or form. But that's just my opinion on that. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Justin Allgaier and Kyle Larson incident. So, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, you probably saw the incident between Justin Allgaier and Kyle Larson that preceded the Austin Hill and Eric Almirola situation, which we'll get to near the end of this episode. But late in this race, there was a caution that came out for rain, with Justin Allgaier having to lead over Kyle Larson. We go back green with around 10 or 15 laps to go in the event, and Kyle Larson was on the inside and Justin Allgaier was on the outside. Kyle Larson actually got a decent restart, but Justin Allgaier was making the outside on the restart work very, very well, and they were side by side going into turn number 1. Unfortunately, Kyle Larson would go up the track and miss the corner. Seemed like he got a little bit sideways under Justin Allgaier and would get into Allgaier, spinning Allgaier into the outside wall, and Brandon Jones got collected in the wreck. Justin Allgaier and Brandon Jones' days would unfortunately come to an end. This would give the opportunity for Conor Zilch to take the race lead. And then, unfortunately for Brandon Jones, he got collected, and his day would be pretty much over at that particular point as well. Now, Justin Algar was definitely dejected after the incident. It seemed like he wasn't too angry about it, but he was definitely dejected about the incident. Kyle Larson did take responsibility for the incident on the racetrack, and he says, though, I don't really know what I could have done differently. He said that Justin Algar was crowding him a little bit going into the corner, but he also said that he takes responsibility because he probably shouldn't have been a wreck like that to begin with. To me, I think a lot of people are going after Kyle Larson for the incident because, yes, Kyle Larson is a Cup Series driver coming down and racing Xfinity. And, yes, it does have an effect on Justin Allgaier in the regular season championship and Brandon Jones, who I believe is still in the top 10 in the regular season standings at the moment. But I just chalked this up as a racing incident. I think Kyle Larson made a mistake. I think that's clear. I don't think Larson had any intentions to miss the corner just to wreck Kyle Larson, Justin Allgaier. I've seen a few people say that that was intentional, which absolutely clearly was not an intentional wreck. You can clearly see that Kyle Larson was trying to hang on. He doesn't miss a corner like that all the time, so I don't really understand why people are trying to say he did that fully intentionally, when in my opinion, that was not intentional in any way, shape, or form. He just missed a corner. That being said, I felt for Justin Allgaier because it looked like Justin Allgaier was going to win the race, and instead, he has a car that's unfortunately destroyed because of Kyle Larson making a mistake in the corner. Is disappointing for sure. I feel for Justin Allgaier, but that was not intentional. And to me, I understand. And I don't really love when people do the best driver in the world comments. I think that's completely unnecessary and uncalled for because every driver makes a mistake. But anytime Kyle Larson makes a mistake, everyone has to go do, the best driver in the world. Larson made a mistake. There's no doubt about it. And I just don't really love when people do the best driver in the world comments because I think that's a little stupid from some people. I think he just made a simple mistake. There's nothing to it other than that. It was just a simple mistake by Kyle Larson going into a corner. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson once again. Now, this story has kind of gone under the radar because of a lot of stuff that's been happening with Kyle Larson from the last couple of days. But Dustin Long, I believe, was from NBC Sports, actually spoke to Kyle Larson about the potential possibility of maybe bringing the High Limit Series to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway dirt track. The dirt track, of course, hosts the BC 39 Nationals, which Kyle Larson has contested in that. And I believe he's won the BC 39 Nationals in the sprint car side as well. Well, Kyle Larson says they could absolutely bring the High Limit Series to Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They're definitely open to it. They're probably going to have some talks and discussions with Roger Penske and Doug Bowles as well about that potential possibility. I absolutely would love to see the High Limit Series go to Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You've got a lot of the major series that are racing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Of course, the NASCAR Cup Series and the Xfinity Series. You have IndyCar. You had Formula One for many, many years, even though Formula One doesn't race at that track anymore because of what happened in 2005. And then many other series race at that track as well. I think if your series wants to be known and taken fully seriously, regardless of what type of racing it is, you need to have a racing series join up at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I really hope we do get to see a chance and opportunity where the High Limit Series gets to go, because what the High Limit Series and what Kyle Larson and that team over there have been doing is absolutely incredible and phenomenal as well. And I really hope we do get to see a series like this get the opportunity and get the chance to go there, because there's a lot of stars that probably want to win an Indy, even if it's not on the big oval. Some of those drivers do have dreams to win on the big oval, and maybe they'll get their first start at that, and maybe you'll get some drivers out of nowhere coming in and winning in the High Limit Series, a series that's been having a lot of success and has been doing very, very well. So nonetheless, really hope we do get to see the High Limit Series in the not-so-distant future come there. I think there's a good chance that happens, and I think it'll be pretty cool if we do maybe see in 2026 schedules. I don't think the 2026 schedule has been released at this point. I think it'd be pretty cool for that series to be at the track in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, after the NASCAR Cup Series race concluded from Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the Brickyard 400, of course today was the final race for TNT, as NBC and USA will start their coverage for 2025, starting this upcoming weekend at Iowa Speedway. And Dale Jr. reflected on having all 10 races covered from the prime scene and from being in the TNT booth as well. He spoke on being back in the booth. He said he had a lot of fun being back at the booth for the last 10 weeks, but he's also going to enjoy being a fan for the remainder of the season. Of course, Dale Jr. will be focused quite a bit on owning his own organization as that organization continues to have an extremely dominant season, as we talked about earlier, where they've won 12 races so far this year and scored their 100th win. And I think Dale Jr. is going to be back to being more of a fan than being in the commentary side of things. But it felt really good to see Dale Jr. back in the booth with TNT and also with Amazon Prime this year. Now, in the 5 races that Dale Jr. covered Amazon Prime, I think the Amazon Prime coverage, I think we all can agree, the Amazon Prime coverage for this year was absolutely absolutely exceptional and was absolutely phenomenal. It was some of the best coverage we have seen for racing in quite some time, considering how bad Fox Sports' coverage has been. It really felt like a new refresh for Prime coming in, and their coverage has been absolutely phenomenal. When TNT came in, I think a lot of us were really excited. I don't think any of us expected that their coverage was going to be on the same level as Amazon Prime. And I think they actually had a really good week for the Brickyard 400, but generally their coverage has been a little bit flat compared to that. Now, I think it's been definitely way better than Fox's coverage has been this year, especially for their Truck Series coverage. But I do think that they had some issues that do need to be resolved. But I do think they'll work on that. But it also, again, felt really good to see that Dale Jr. was back in a commentary booth and doing commentary once again for races, because it just felt like in 2024, well, yes, I think NBC's coverage this year, or last year, I should say, was actually not bad. It did take a step backwards. Now, with NBC doing the stuff and the promotion, among other things, and helping with the production with the coverage for NASCAR's coverage on Prime, that really helped as well. But still really good to see Dale Jr. back in the booth. I think it was good to see him do commentary once again. It's going to suck not seeing him do commentary, but at the same time, it's good to see him back in the sport doing stuff, and now he'll fully focus on trying to go out there and win a championship in the Xfinity Series and try to win another championship after how dominant they've been in the Xfinity Series so far this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Rockingham Speedway. As it was officially confirmed by the Rockingham Speedway Twitter X account that Rockingham Speedway is officially up for sale. There wasn't really much put into the article that was put out, but as expected, there's been a lot of talk about this, that Rockingham Speedway was expected to be sold, and now basically the owners of the track, I can't remember who the owner of the track is, but they have gone ahead and said that they are going to be putting the track up for sale, and whoever is the first buyer that wants to keep this track going for many, many years, that person will be able to come in and buy up the track. This, of course, is coming off the really successful doubleheader that took place at the track, actually a triple header if you count the ARCA East event, but it was a very successful event in the Truck Series event where we saw Tyler Ingram snap a winless streak earlier in the year, get his second career Truck Series win, his first win in 2025, and we also saw originally Jesse Love pick up the win, then of course got disqualified from the event, and that gave the win to Sammy Smith, who picked up his first ever win at Rockingham Speedway. There's still unknowns about the future of Rockingham Speedway because we don't know if this track will be on the Xfinity Series or Truck Series schedules for 2025, and it's been noted by Jordan Bianchi as well. I thought there'd be a chance that Rockingham could potentially host the All-Star race in 2026. It sounds like North Wilkesboro once again, despite the fact that Fox is trying to push that they were going to get a points-paying race this year, it sounds like that North Wilkesboro will be the All-Star race once again in 2026, which I'm saying at this point, can we please, for the love of God, give North Wilkesboro a points-paying race? That would be a really good decision at this point, considering I thought the racing in North Wilkesboro was actually really good. I get that you don't want a points race for the Cup Series right now, and I completely understand that, but I don't think that we should be seeing a non-points race at the track and give a 400-lap event with a lot of lap traffic, because I think the racing for that would absolutely be phenomenal and incredible to watch, and I hope that does happen in the future. But I hope that whoever comes in and buys it, I'd have to think NASCAR is in the running to get that. SMI could potentially buy it, which they used to own the track, I believe, back in the day. So it'd be interesting if they came in and bought up and took over the track overall. And I know that NASCAR does have long-term plans for Rockingham if they continue going there, and I think that's a big question. Will they race at Rockingham in 2026 for the lower series? That will be the big question currently at the moment right now. But nonetheless, I'm glad to see that there's talk about it. I hope that we do get to see Rockingham on the schedule long-term. Whoever buys it, hope they do a really good job taking over the track in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are once again talking about Bubba Wallace's Brickyard 400 win. Now, Bubba Wallace, of course, picked up his third career NASCAR Cup Series win, snapped the over 100 race winless streak, and scored his first ever Crown Jewel win in the 2025 Brickyard 400. This is only the third win for an open car in NASCAR Cup Series history, because remember, 2011 and Front Row no longer have their charters for the remainder of the regular season at this point. And of course, they're all three of those cars, Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, Riley Herbst, and then the front row cars of Todd Gillen, Zane Smith, and Noah Gragson are all open cars. The only other two times it's happened in NASCAR Cup history to win as open cars, those, of course, are Shane Van Gisbergen at the Chicago Street Course in the Project 91 car. And then, of course, we also saw AJ Allmendinger win at Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the road course in 2021. And this is a very popular win in the industry because he also becomes the first African-American driver to win at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Throughout the Indy 500s, the USGPs, and many other events that have taken place, that is absolutely a phenomenal accomplishment. For Bubba Wallace, this is a really, really big deal to win his first ever Brickyard 400. And we know Bubba Wallace historically has been very, very good at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He generally shows up to the racetrack and is one of the odds-on favorites going in, considering coming into this year's event. He didn't have a win, but he had 2 top 5s and 3 top 10 finishes in 4 races on the oval. And now he has a stat with 1 win, 3 top 5s, and 4 top 10 finishes in 5 races. And I just think that you think about today how big of a win this is for Bubba Wallace to make the playoffs, snap that winless streak, get it done out there, show everybody that I can absolutely do it. Seeing his kid, holding his kid, that was an amazing moment for the sport, and I think it's an absolute incredible win for Bubba Wallace. He earned the win today, picked up his 3rd career win, and I think that this team, because coming into this year, I think we all thought that when he and Charles Deneke were going to team up together for this year, we all expected they both were going to do an extremely well job. And early in the year, there was a lot of momentum from this team and a lot of confidence from this team, but there also were a ton of mistakes as well. But now we don't have to worry about that for Bubba. He doesn't have to focus on fighting for a bubble spot at this point. It's a really big deal for Bubba. Congratulations to him. A lot of people came to congratulate him. Kyle Larson went to victory lane. Joe Gibbs went to victory lane. I think Denny Hamlin went to victory lane, I saw. And many other people congratulated Bubba, including Roger Kroo and many others in the industry like Denny Hamlin went up to congratulate Bubba on picking up the win. I saw SVG bump in the back of his car. If you've seen his stuff with the Legends car stuff, they both had a friendly rivalry and a lot of fun with that. So I think for Bubba, it's a really big deal. Congratulations to Bubba Wallace on winning the Brickyard 400 and scoring his first ever not open win, but his first ever crown jewel win. A well-earned and well-deserved victory for him, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Conor Zilch. Now, we do have a couple Conor Zilch stories to talk about today on the channel, but first of all is around a story that came out earlier this evening and was reported, I believe, by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star and Adam Stern as well. As Conor Zilch has officially confirmed that he is open to trying to run the Indianapolis 500. He says, I want to run the Indy 500. That is something that I absolutely want to do in my career. Many drivers dream to run the Indianapolis 500. It's been something on my bucket list for a very, very long time. I really hope I do get the chance and opportunity to run the Indy 500 in the future. Many people have been clamoring for Conor Zilch to be the driver who could potentially be that guy who can go and run the Indianapolis 500. And when you think about Conor Zilch, what he has done in racing over the course of the last few years, he was in go-karts just 2 or 3 years ago and was going up against drivers who are in Formula One. Guys like Kimi Antonelli, who are competing for Mercedes in Formula One currently at the moment. He got brought over to the U.S. to race in stock cars thanks to Kevin Harvick seeing him help his son Keelan Harvick when it came to road course racing. He came over. He won a Cars Tour race at the young age, I believe, like 16 or 17. He won a lot of ARCA East races in 2025. Probably should have won the championship and not for an incident. He won a ton of ARCA races, including winning at Watkins Glen in dominating fashion. In his Xfinity Series debut, he went on to win that event in dominating fashion. And so far this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, he has scored 5 wins, including 3 straight wins in Xfinity competition and 6 career wins, all with Jr Motorsports. And now we know it's very likely he'll be in the NASCAR Cup Series full-time in 2026, where I think he has the opportunity to be the best rookie we have seen in a very, very long time. I think, especially since we know that Trackhouse Racing has expressed interest in the last couple of years, because going back to last year, remember, during the All-Star race, Justin Marks did confirm that they have expressed interest in wanting to run the Indianapolis 500. I think you have to look at 2 drivers from that team who would be the best people to do it. That'd be Shane Van Gisbergen and Conor Zilch. And I think Conor Zilch, no disrespect to SVGs, I think SVG is a great driver, but I do think Conor Zilch would be able to at least adapt a little quicker because he is a lot younger, and especially with his past experience racing in open wheels and stuff like that, I think the Conor Zilch could absolutely be very, very competitive. He's been open to a lot of different things. He's been open to wanting to do the Chili Bowl Nationals. He actually had an opportunity to do that in 2025, but because he ran the Rolex 24, in which he's also a winner in the Rolex 24 in the LMP2 class, and was pretty good in the GT class when the Trackhouse Racing project ran. I think it'd be very possible for something like this to happen. I really hope that teams are looking at Conor Zilch, and teams would be foolish if there was an opportunity to get a guy like Conor Zilch to run the Indy 500. You would be foolish to not get him behind the wheel of your race car because of how great and amazing of a driver he is. And I really hope we do get to see him have that chance and opportunity in the not-so-distant future to run in the Indianapolis 500, because I think he'd do an absolute phenomenal job. He's a great race car driver at such a young age. And I think that the fact that there's confirmation of this happening, because we've seen Kyle Busch be open to run the Indy 500 multiple different times. We've obviously seen Kyle Larson do it. And other drivers have expressed interest, like Ryan Blaney. I believe Austin Cindric's expressed interest. And others like Joey Logano have expressed interest as well in running to do it. I think that Conor Zilch should be the perfect guy. We'll see if he does in the near future get the chance and opportunity to run the Indianapolis 500. We'll see if that happens very, very soon. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stuart Fzen. Now, we talked about the story on the channel after the Truck Series race concluded, but originally Stuart Fzen had finished third in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Indianapolis Raceway Park. But unfortunately, a couple hours after the race concluded, he was disqualified from the truck race at IRP. Now, why was he disqualified from the Truck Series race at IRP despite originally finishing in third? Well, it was the front heights on the car were not level to the car in inspection. Now, big question we were asking after this happened, which I did not think that this team was going to do anything after this. Well, it was confirmed that the team and Homer Friesen Racing are going to appeal the disqualification. Their statement was released. I think they said there was something that would malfunction in one of the parts on the truck, and that is where they will go ahead and appeal that. Now, NASCAR could appeal it this week. There is a potential possibility that could happen on Tuesday and Wednesday, but with some other thing that they're going to be really focusing on, I am not so sure that this is going to be a major priority for that. I think, though, that they have if it's a parts malfunction, then maybe they can win the appeal. But for Stuart Fzen, it's disappointing, and I really am a little surprised to see that they are appealing this because, one, if they had won the race, it would make a lot of sense, right? Because you were the guy that won. And to be fair, he had a really good truck that night and was running inside the top 5 and did lead some laps in the end. But I do think that if it's a parts malfunction, maybe NASCAR could be a little more lenient with that. But at the same time, NASCAR has been very strict when it comes to these rules. And I believe for the Truck Series this year, when it comes to disqualifications, we've had 3 or 4 in the Truck Series this year. Remember the big one, Parker Kligerman. Parker Kligerman had originally won the Truck Series race at Daytona. Then a couple hours later, he was disqualified, and Cory went on to win. They tried to appeal that disqualification, and they lost that appeal and didn't get a chance to do it once again. Henderson was thinking about going full-time at that point. They, of course, did not do that. They went on only run part-time this season with Parker Kligerman. And then other drivers like Patrick Emerling, I think BJ McLeod at one point as well. And there's been some other disqualifications this year, of course, in the lower series in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. You obviously had, I believe, Daniel Dye get disqualified not too long ago. You had, I believe, Sammy Smith get disqualified. You also had, I believe, Jesse Love get disqualified this year. And then, of course, in the Cup Series, you've had some other drivers get disqualified. Of course, you had a double one for Ryan Preece and Joey Logano. Eric Jones got disqualified earlier this year. And then, of course, I believe other drivers have been disqualified in the Cup Series so far, 25. And then 2024, of course, you had the Alex Bowman one. And then in 2023 or 22, you had a double disqualification for Denny Hamlin. And then, of course, Kyle Busch. And then Brad Keselowski's got a disqualification or 2 so far this year. And then, of course, you had other things that have happened and other big penalties that have been received so far this year. Nonetheless, it's interesting to see what will happen with the appeal. I'm not really sure if they're going to win the appeal at this point. We'll see what happens, but I'm not surprised or shocked to see their appeal. I'm a little surprised considering they didn't win the race, but if a team thinks they can present the evidence and can show that they can win the appeal, I don't see why not at this point. Just show the evidence and show that you're clear, and then maybe you'll get the opportunity to win that appeal at that particular moment in point. We'll see if they do win their appeal, but I don't think they will, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott. Now, one of the big debates that's been going on throughout the week so far is the format. And a lot of this sprung up because of how people on Sirius and NASCAR Radio like Larry McReynolds and Daniel Trotta completely went after Mark Martin. They said they didn't go after Mark Martin, but they absolutely went after Mark Martin because Mark Martin has been absolutely pushing with the playoff committee to get a full season format on the schedule once again. Well, of course, they pushed back against that, which isn't shocking and surprising, and they went on to show a lot of disrespect. But that has sparked a lot of playoff debate once again in the industry, and one driver that was asked about this was Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott basically said something that I think many of us are going to be a little surprised about. But Chase Elliott says that he is actually in favor of a full season format, and going back to that once again. He says motorsports does not have to be like everybody else. You don't need to have a playoff system because, well, competitive the regular season championship has been so far in 2025 with how there being 3 or 4 drivers who have a really good chance and opportunity to win the regular season championship in 2025. That, of course, being Chase Elliott, William Byron, Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, and also Christopher has an outside shot of getting that as well. You don't need that. And you don't need to have a playoff gimmick to basically determine it. It doesn't determine who's the best every single year. I agree with Chase Elliott pretty much most of the way, in my opinion. I don't think we need to have a playoff system. I know there's been a lot of people, like myself, say that there could be some sort of compromise for the format, and there was a lot of talk about that during the teardown earlier tonight. Jordan Bianchi and Jeff Gluck do not expect there to be any playoff changes. That's what they're thinking with the way things and discussions are going on. They don't really feel like there's going to be any sort of changes in the playoff format, and if that's the case, that's going to be really disappointing because I absolutely do believe there needs to be major changes to the playoff format in NASCAR right now because I just don't think the playoff format that NASCAR has currently at the moment is determining the best of champions. I mean, look at Joey Logano, for example. Yes, Logano won the title, got 4 wins that year. Logano had a 17.2 average finish. He was nowhere near the best guy all year, and basically only 1 or 2 guys that made the Final Four were truly deserving of having a shot at winning that championship. Ryan Blaney was not amazing last year. He's actually been faster this year in the Cup Series than he was last year. And you think about Ty Majeski, yes, absolutely, Corey Heimer, Christian Eckes should have won the title last year in trucks, and Ty Majeski is the guy who won the championship. The problem is the one race championship is a major, major gimmick. You do not need to have this system. And again, there is a compromise and a way to go about this, but I just feel like that we need to go back more to the full season format because I think the full season format is going to be the best way to determine a champion. And I know that people are going to say, well, a driver's just going to pull away and win the title instantly. There's only been about 5 times or 6 times in NASCAR Cup history with the Winston Cup format where the driver clinched championship one race early. That doesn't happen much. The biggest issue that the Winston Cup format had was the fact that a driver could win only 1 or 2 races, and a driver could win a lot of races, but they didn't get a lot of points. The simplest thing they could have done from the get-go is award more points to the driver who won the race. That was the biggest issue with that format as it is. If you award more points to the driver who wins the race, that's a simple solution. I think that if you keep the stage points, because I don't think you're going to have a driver run away with the championship if you have this because of how the format, the field is, how close the field is. With the next-gen car and everything else, the field is so much closer at this point that you do not need a full season champion. You need a full season championship. You don't need the playoff format at this point. I think the playoff format is way too gimmicky. It's way too stupid for championships. And I get that people like it. If you like the playoff format, that's fine. It's just not for me at this point. I do believe that there need to go back to a full season format. I think that's the best way to determine a championship. Then Brad Keselowski is in support of Chase Elliott, and I think many in the industry are supportive of going back to full season format. You don't see this in IndyCar. You don't see this in Formula One. So if NASCAR wants to be taken seriously, I think they got to get rid of the playoffs at this point and go back to full season format. I think that's the best way to determine a championship. I agree with Chase Elliott wholeheartedly about that, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Conor Zilch once again. Now, speaking to the media after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race concluded from Indianapolis Motor Speedway, there's something that caught the eye after also winning the pole as well, having a really fast car. Conor Zilch speaking to me about 2026 a little bit and might have slipped up and spoke on what his plans are going to be for 2026. As he basically says about being next year on road courses, basically getting the opportunity to race at Watkins Glen in the NASCAR Cup Series event, it might have slipped up and might have revealed his plans for 2026 accidentally. Now, I think it is a worst kept secret at this point. Many of us are expecting that Conor Zilch is going to be headed to the NASCAR Cup Series full time in 2026. What team is he going to be driving for? He is expected to drive the number 99 car for Trackhouse Racing in 2026. Why is this happening? Well, we all know it's been confirmed that Daniel Suarez will not be returning to Trackhouse Racing in 2026 at this point. One, Daniel Suarez has been really struggling in the NASCAR Cup Series so far. And number 2, you have Shane Van Gisbergen, who will be back in the number 88 car next year. It's just not been officially announced at this point. We all know that SVG will, of course, be back in the number 88 car next season. And Shane Van Gisbergen is not only really good at road courses and much better at road courses than Daniel Suarez at this point, but he's actually getting better on ovals as well. His average finish on ovals has been much better. SVG, of course, finishing in the top 20 in the Brickyard 400. I know Daniel Suarez got damaged in that big stack up and was ahead of SVG, but Daniel Suarez is also starting to be getting outperformed by SVG on the ovals at this particular point. I think Conor Zilch is absolutely ready to make the jump. We've already talked about how good he's been in the Xfinity Series in recent weeks. His numbers have absolutely been phenomenal. In the last 9 Xfinity Series races since coming back from his back injury, he has like an average finish of like second place and has 4 wins in the last 6 races and 9 straight top 5 finishes. We have not seen that in Xfinity Series competition since like Austin Center did it back in 2020, where he had a lot of top 5s and top 10s in a row. And I think we all know, though, going into next year, that we have to have realistic expectations. I don't think anybody should be expecting Conor Zilch to go into 2026 and be absolute dominant. He's going to struggle at times, but that's what you should expect. We've seen this with Tai Gibbs. Tai Gibbs was extremely dominant in Xfinity competition, has 6 or 7 wins in 2022, went on to win the championship, but then, of course, he struggled in the Cup Series the last couple of years. Even though I will say for Tai Gibbs, he's been getting a lot closer to winning races and has been starting to show a lot more pace and a lot more speed. But I think that we all know that Conor is going to eventually get very strong and really, really quick. And I think it's not going to be long before we do see Conor Zilch go out there and contend for a championship and Cup. He wants to be the youngest NASCAR Cup Series champion ever, and I think that Conor has a really good opportunity and a very strong chance to definitely do that in the not-so-distant future, because I think next year he is going to be someone that is going to be a force to be reckoned with and someone to watch for. Now, the other big question is, what does this mean for Daniel Suarez, with Zilich likely going in that seat? Daniel Suarez, we all know, won't be back. We do not think he'll be going in Cup. The only seat that I see open for Suarez going into next year is a number 7 car for Spire. Of course, if Justin Haley does not return to the team, which I do think that Justin Haley is going to stay with the 7 car for next year. I just don't see him having another year of sticking around. So I do think that next year Conor Zilch goes into that, and I think Suarez ends up in the number 88 next year or the number 9 for Junior Motorsports. I think that's the best landing spot for Conor Zilch at this particular moment in point. I think that's the best thing you could do, and I think that's where you'll see Zilich go next year, is a Trackhouse Racing team, and I think that Daniel Suarez ends up in the number 88 car next year. I think he'll do much better. I think he'll show more pace and speed. And I think that Zilich is going to do an unbelievable job in the Cup in the future. I think it's going to be a struggle. I think he'll do a really good job on the road courses next year. But I think for 2026, I think you're going to see Suarez end up at Junior Motorsports. Well, I think Conor Zilch will end up in the Trackhouse Racing team. And that'll be announced here in the not-so-distant future with how good he's been doing in Xfinity Series as of late. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. As it was officially announced on Friday afternoon, Denny Hamlin has signed a multi-year contract extension with Joe Gibbs Racing that will keep him in the number 11 car throughout the 2027 season. Denny Hamlin also confirmed to the media as well this likely could be his final contract extension with Joe Gibbs Racing, so the next couple years could be the final years of Denny Hamlin's career. There was a lot of talk and conversation, of course, coming into 2025, because Denny Hamlin did not have Chris Gabehart as a crew chief going into the year, and Chris Gale was coming in as a crew chief in 2025, which, of course, we knew Chris Gale kind of struggled with Tai Gibbs in 2024. He also lost FedEx at the end of last year, but he did pick up a massive sponsorship in Progressive at the beginning of this year that is sponsored for the majority of races throughout the remainder of 2025. There were questions about whether Hamlin was going to return to this team because of the lawsuit going on and all the pressure that Denny Hamlin has had in the last little bit. But Denny Hamlin has let that pressure not really get to him. And I think this contract extension is not surprising, at least for 2026. What is surprising is that Denny Hamlin not only signed for 2026, but also for 2027 as well. But it's not surprising when you've had as good of a season as Denny Hamlin's had. Denny Hamlin's been really impressive in 2025. He has scored the most wins in the NASCAR Cup Series this year, with 4 wins so far this year. And Denny Hamlin is currently gaining a lot on the regular season championship, with him currently right now having so far 4 wins and only being 20 points back of the regular season championship, which currently Chase Elliott holds at this moment. And his numbers have been absolutely incredible. He had a solid run, I believe, at Sonoma. Well, did not a really good run there, but he ran really well at Pocono, finishing in the runner-up position to Chase Briscoe and winning at Dover just a couple weeks back. It is very rare nowadays that you see a driver, especially at Denny Hamlin's age, having a lot of success, because a lot of drivers who get up to that mid-40 range, they really struggle. They don't have the same consistent pace and speed. Kevin Harvick, it took a little bit of time for the struggles to happen, but I think of drivers like Mark Martin who were really good when they were a lot older. I think about Tony Stewart a little bit, though Tony Stewart started struggling in his early 40s because, unfortunately, of the leg injury in 2013. And then I think of other drivers who kind of struggled around this time. Jeff Gordon started fading off a bit at that point. Jimmy Johnson was in his early 40s, started struggling quite a bit after winning multiple races in 2017. It's very rare to see drivers around Denny Hamlin's age now be super successful. And Denny Hamlin does say as well that he will know when he is ready to retire. He wants to know, and he doesn't want the cliff to come into play. He wants to know when his final win is going to come. And you think about this, a lot of guys who have come into the next-gen era, a lot of older drivers who have really struggled in the next-gen era. I think about guys like Brad Keselowski, who have been as strong in the next-gen era. I think about Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch has not won a NASCAR Cup Series race since Gateway in 2023. I think of Joey Logano. Joey Logano has not been as strong in the next-gen era. Yes, I know he's won 3 championships, and 2 of those in the last 3 or 4 years, but Logano's not been really good in the regular season. And I think of other drivers that are even younger, like Chase Elliott, though Chase is starting to figure it out. It is very rare for, and Mark Truex Jr. and Kevin Harvick struggled a bit as well. We have seen Denny Hamlin come in and thrive in the next-gen era, and he's been so good for so long. And what's so impressive about Denny Hamlin is he's been with Joe Gibbs Racing now for over 20 years. He has been with the team since 2004, if you go back to his Xfinity Series days, and has been with the team in Cup in some way, shape, or form for 20 years. And it's very rare to see a driver be this good for so long in their career. So for Denny Hamlin, it's a major deal to go out there and sign that contract extension and be with the team for the next 2 years. Now, speaking of which, we're going to talk about some of the other drivers at Joe Gibbs Racing real quick. I think another reason why we didn't see him go away for the next couple of years, there's no one ready in the lower series. William Swalch is in no way, shape, or form ready for a Cup Series C, and Taylor Gray, while he's showing improvement, isn't ready, in my opinion, for a Cup ride. And I know that Brent Cruz is good, but Brent, it's going to take a few years for him to be really good. The other thing you got to look at is the other drivers at the team. I believe Bell's contract goes for a couple more years with Joe Gibbs Racing. Tai Gibbs is a grandson of the team. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. And then, of course, you have Chase Briscoe. I believe his contract goes through 2026. With how good he's been so far this season, especially in recent weeks, he's not going anywhere anytime soon and will stick with the Joe Gibbs Racing team, at least for the foreseeable future. Especially look at the Cup silly season stuff that's going to be happening in the future. Guys like Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, they're both only signed through next year. I expect Larson to sign an extension with his team. I also do think that Bowman will probably sign an extension. You got Bubba Wallace, who probably will sign an extension with 23XI now, especially after winning the Brickyard 400, getting a lot of money, even though they're not a charter team. Tyler Reddick is signed for a couple years. Riley Herbst is signed through next year. And there's some other drivers like Ross Chastain and SVG who probably be free agents technically, but they're probably both going to sign extensions. You've got other drivers like Brad Keselowski who could retire at the end of next year, and Ryan Preece and Busch are only signed through next year. Those drivers I expect to stay with RFK, but you never know at this point. So that's going to be interesting on the silly season front. But nonetheless, it's really good to see that he is back in 2026 and 27. He's performing at the top of his game, performing very well. And it's no shock and surprise to see that Denny Hamlin is going to be sticking around with Joe Gibbs Racing, at least for the foreseeable future, with how good he's been doing and well he's been running. It's no shock and surprise to see Denny Hamlin signing an extension with Joe Gibbs Racing for the next couple of years. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the incident once again between Austin Hill and Aric Almirola. This is going to be the big story coming out of the weekend, is what happened on the racetrack during the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So, of course, we talk about the Kyle Larson and Justin Algar incident. This had preceded the incident by about 5 or 6 laps. So, with around 10 laps to go in the event, Aric Almirola and Austin Hill, I believe, were battling for around 5th or 6th position and were battling for a potential top 5 spot. Aric Almirola clearly had the faster car and was running Austin Hill down in a really big way and had a faster car at that point. And apparently, Austin Hill had blocked Aric Almirola 3 times throughout the run, even though Aric had made some bad blocks in his own right throughout the whole entire event. Well, going into turn number 3 with around 10 laps to go in the race, Aric Almirola would get into Austin Hill and move him up the racetrack. Hill would have a really impressive save. I don't think there's any denying that. What happened next, though, was completely unacceptable. He would gun the car to the left and right rear Aric Almirola down the straightaway really hard into the outside wall, destroying his car. Aric would reveal later that was probably the hardest hit that he has had since his Kansas crash in 2017, where he had to sit out multiple different races. And on the radio communication for the number 19 team, they said that was an intentional wreck, and they need to, if there's a president said, they need to suspend Austin Hill for the next week. Meanwhile, Austin Hill originally went on the radio and said, "I'm sorry, I did not mean to run into him. I don't know what he was doing. If you're going to get into me multiple times, I don't know what he expected at that point." Well, NASCAR did not see it that way, as NASCAR would penalize Austin Hill 5 blasts for the intentional wreck. And Austin Hill would go on the radio and basically say, fuck NASCAR, fuck everything about this. This is bullshit, and that's ridiculous because I got into him, not intentionally, right rearing him down the straightaway. Well, after the race concluded and this incident took place, Richard Childress was asked by the media, do you think that Austin Hill should be suspended? He said, hell no. Austin Center did not get suspended for what he did to Ty Dillon at Circuit of the Americas, and he basically said, we're a blue-collar team, they just pick on us because we're not the big man. We're a blue-collar team. Blue-collar team this, blue-collar team that. Let's start with the Richard Childress side of things real quick. Richard Childress, you are worth $250 million in your net worth. You own a winery. You own a company. You can't play the blue-collar game anymore, considering you're no longer a blue-collar team when you're making $250,000 and you're a winery. Also, you probably should hold your driver accountable for what happened on the racetrack, considering there's another one of your drivers that is involved in a controversy. That, in my opinion, is what Richard Childress should be doing. Richard Childress has got a great legacy for many, many years ago. The last 10 or 15 years has not been as strong since Kevin Harvick left the team, and since the most recent years, he's really hurt his legacy as a car owner in the sport. And the way he handles things is not good, in my opinion. Other owners would hold their drivers accountable for stupid mistakes. Richard doesn't do that, and that's a problem. Because your driver was the one at fault. You wouldn't be getting called to the hauler if your driver didn't make a dumb move on the racetrack. So that is absolutely your fault. Going back to the incident that took place between Austin Hill and Aric Almirola, I think it's very clear as day, and I said this yesterday in my video talking about this, I think Austin Hill should absolutely be suspended. Now, one of the stipulation rules that have come into play with the getting suspension is if you are suspended for a non-medical situation, you will lose all your playoff points if you are suspended. Now, you can still get a playoff waiver, but you no longer can keep all your playoff points. You basically would start at 0, even if you get more throughout it. You would start at 0 playoff points. It would be going in a big hole. NASCAR, in my opinion, absolutely has no choice in this situation, and they absolutely 100% need to suspend Austin Hill. Because it's not the first time that Austin Hill has done something blatant like this on the racetrack. During a caution at Charlotte Motor Speedway, he intentionally wrecked Cole Custer under yellow. He left-reared him, not right-reared him, but he wrecked him under caution and spun him into the inside wall, and Cole Custer had a lot of damage. NASCAR didn't do anything then. What makes the situation worse is, one, it's at a high-speed oval at over 150 miles an hour. They had the full-speed package, the restrictor plate package. Again, they're not going as fast as if they would have been going like in the Cup Series race. But you're still going over 150 miles an hour going into the corner. That is absolutely uncalled for. That is 100% a suspendable act there. What makes this worse is one of how hard the hit was, but he hit in a non-safer barrier area. Now, one question I have to ask Indianapolis Motor Speedway, can we please, for the love of God, get safer barriers on that area, because there's no reason we should be having non-safer barrier areas in 2025. That's totally unacceptable. And there is a precedent set in the past. 2 drivers have been suspended for incidents like this. Look at what happened in 2023 during the Coke 600 after Chase Lake came back from his crash. He right-reared Denny Hamlin down the straightaway during the Coke 600. Guess what? He got suspended for a week. Corey LaJoie took over the 9. Carson Osbar took over the number 7, which led to Carson getting an opportunity to drive for Spire full-time. And then previously in 2022, Bubba Wallace, the winner of the Brickyard 400, right-rear Kyle Larson down the straightaway. Bubba got a 1-race suspension, Homestead Miami Speedway. John Nemechek substituted for him in that seat. It is a no-brainer at this point. If you do not suspend Austin Hill for what happened on the racetrack, you're going to be opening up a massive and major can of worms. So NASCAR has no choice, in my opinion, to do this, to suspend him and take away his points. And in my opinion, especially after the rant, it would not surprise me or shock me if he gets a multiple race suspension. Because you don't go after and get mad at NASCAR and throw a temper tantrum on the radio. That is absolutely uncalled for. You don't go on there and throw a little bit of a baby tantrum because you didn't get your way. Boo-hoo, Austin Hill. You intentionally wrecked somebody. You right-reared him down the straightaway. You could have absolutely hurt somebody, especially at a track that fast. I don't like it when people do it at short tracks like this, but when you do it at a high-speed oval, you absolutely deserve to get suspended for it. So I really hope NASCAR takes the right action and suspends him. In RCR, there needs to be a talk down to Richard Childress to stop doing this. But it doesn't surprise or shock me Richard Childress does stuff like this. But again, there needs to be a suspension handed out to Austin Hill. And I really hope NASCAR does that and makes the right call, right decision, which will get a decision in the coming weeks. I would expect either Kyle Busch or Austin Hill to probably drive that car when we do get the official word on that for the Xfinity race at Iowa, if we do see the suspension happen. So that is going to today's Law NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Your thoughts about the Austin Hill situation. You think he should be suspended? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And your thoughts about Denny Hamlin signing a contract extension with JGR. Let me your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any major news that breaks later today, we'll discuss live on the channel, but tomorrow we are going to have probably the intros for the Cup Series race at Iowa, and we'll have some other videos dropping as well, like a potential silly season update dropping this week perhaps. Might drop that on Tuesday instead of the intros. Wednesday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days. We'll have the Xfinity Series race picks for Iowa, then of course, which NBC returning, and then on Sunday or Thursday, we'll have Cup race picks for Iowa, and then of course, we'll have the paint skin video dropping. Then Friday, I'll have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days. I might do a review of the ARCA race at Iowa. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I got content coming out. People like Haley Began, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carlos Kerbush, Cobblish, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Clay Savard, Dodge, Ram, Frankie Minas, all the good stuff will be coming out in the coming weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great Austin NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.